Welcome, dear students. The current session focuses on the significance of English language in Pakistani context. I hope and expect by the end of this session you would be able to understand the use and usage of English language in Pakistani context, and you would also be able to relate this to the wider global context. Well, my dear students, to understand the status of English in Pakistan, we need to trace the history of Pakistan, both in political and social sense as well as in the linguistic sense. Pakistan was a part of a larger area, a region, South Asia, and in fact, it was, as the subcontinent was under the, colonial, rule of the British. And it was only in 1947 that we got independence, and Pakistan and India were established as separate states. During the British colonial period, English language was the language of government, it was the language of administration, it was the language of business. In fact, it was the language of the rulers. So, it was the language of power. And by the way, it was also considered to be the most suitable language for education as well. During this colonial experience, of course, there were other languages, the local languages that were coexisting. However, those languages were not that powerful as was English. Most of these languages and the proponents of those languages who were promoting them, had the nationalistic, perspectives on that. When Pakistan and India got independence, this became a huge question for each of these states, that which would be the language of for the official purposes in each of these countries. Now, to answer these crucial questions, there were certain perspectives. An important factor in this was that during the colonial period, English had not been associated with any of the patriotic or nationalistic movements. So it was considered to be more appropriate to be taken as an official language. However, there were, other people who had an ideological perspective who would say that the languages that had more nationalistic or ideological strength, those should be used as official languages. So, for example, in the case of Pakistan, Urdu was a strong contestant of English when it came to the question of being the official language of the country. Because, since Pakistan was created in the name of a certain ideology, and Urdu was, introduced as a language that was related to that ideology, so Urdu had the claims of being the official language. However, because the historical context supported the use of English, because all the legal records, all the government records, all the precedents of the practices in the offices were, in English language. So all these factors favored keeping English as an official language. There were certain, religious parties who felt that maintaining the status of English symbolized a new form of colonization, so they opposed it. They actually wanted an Islamic state and a local language as a representative of that Islamic state. This kind of controversy kept on going on actually for the first 30 years of our country. Unfortunately, we were unable to decide for once and all which language would be taken as an official language. It was only during General Ziaul Haq's times that when movement for more comprehensive Islamization, I would say, of the country was done, that Urdu was considered to be, the main language that should be promoted and should be given official status. So, for example, in 1978, all the schools were instructed to move towards Urdu and to use it as a medium of education. The schools continued, however, to teach in English because, to make a policy is something different and to practice it is something different, because practically there was no precedence of that and it was difficult. And the supporters of English language were the people who were more in power. So, soon there was a realization that, government had embarked on, on a project of implementing a policy that did not have any adequate planning as such at the back. The result is that language policy in subsequent governments has promoted English. According to Rahman, the ruling elite as a whole supports the continued use of English in formal official domains because it ensures its social distinction from the non-elite. So, it's all the game of power. The upper class, the powerful class, the educated class would like to retain English because that is what marks the difference. That is what differentiates them from the non-elite people. Urdu currently, in 2012 and, even today is the national language where, Urdu and English both have the official status of, being used. One government comes and they would say Urdu would be used in the offices. The other comes and would say, no, English would be used in the offices. The balance is more like a seesaw game where, it keeps on changing and moving, shifting. However, both are being used. I would like you to think of the linguistic practices around you. To understand the significance of English language in Pakistan, you need to understand how much and how far and in how many ways you are surrounded by English language. What do you think about and what do you say about the use of English language in your daily lives? Can you really speak a couple of sentences in pure Urdu without using words taken from English? The more a situation becomes formal, the more are the chances that you would use English language. How about your academic careers? In your academic careers, you would notice that all the, throughout the country, the medium of instruction is English, or even in the institutions where it is not, people inspire and aspire to get education in English. Why? Because it is a status symbol. So, English language has gathered a status or has gained a status in Pakistan, which is far more than a foreign language. We use it as a second language.